Hi, Akhil. Welcome to People, Passion and Purpose podcast with Pungi.
Thank you, Pungi. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And I can only thank you. I'm full of gratitude for this opportunity, for the privilege to be here. Thank you.
I think the first time I met you in person, I was like, oh wow, like we had already got to that place where I knew you were working at Amazon. So you were already at a very high position in that space. But then when I met you there, I was like, oh, this person is somebody who I can really just have a amazing conversation with. And no vibes about the leader, nothing. It's about a general person-person connection. And I was absolutely floored by your humbleness and also a lot of that stories. I remember that toothpaste story and then the jam based story. And also after that, the riding the tiger and all that. So I'm sure this podcast will reach into a few of those and a few more that are not known to me and to others as well. So that's what I wanted to share. And also, for somebody who's been the VP for many countries, that the supply chain and the customer delight. So, how do you remain so humble? Is the first question. Like on the agenda today is how do you remain so humble?
It's a great question. I think I have to thank my parents and my family and my circle of friends who have allowed me to stay grounded. I think early childhood, we come from a very middle class family. My father was in the military, border roads. He was a civil engineer in the military, so he was always responsible for building roads at the border areas of the country and also managing airports and stuff like that. So I think as a family, we have always been very grounded, and we were we were very self-aware of what we have and what we don't have. And I think that self-awareness or that knowledge of who you are as a person without the labels was very important. So I would still remember my dad used to be a commanding officer for a unit, and his designation was commander. But I would still see him like when he would come home and he would sit down and work. He would sit down in his banyan and lungi and work and do all the work on his files. And I was like, "Why are you not dressed up like the officer?" And he says, "But that's in the office. At home, I am who I am." And he wouldn't care too much about those. And I think we saw those values in the house. I saw those similar values people around us, and it allowed us to remain very grounded. And I think as a child, we were also taught to be very respectful of people around us. Like I remember in our house, my father would leave for work at 7:20 a.m. Not 7:15, not 7:30, but 7:20.
No.
Uh, and the driver would come with the car, and he would come, and we would have the service bhaiya in the house to help out with the cooking and all. But the mental model was the first breakfast that was cooked in the house would go to the driver. It was simple. There was true toast, anda, chai. That's it. Nothing fancy, but a good, simple breakfast. And the first breakfast that was cooked in the house would go to the driver. And the second one would go to the dog that we had. And the third one would be to the father, to my father, because he had to leave to work. And we would always ask him, like, why do you do this? And his point was, look, the driver is going to be with me for the whole day. And if he's worrying about his food and meal, then he's going to be distracted. And for his own safety and for my own safety, I think the first thing is take care of the people who are with you or who work for you or who work with you. And then the second one was the dog. Jackie was our Apso, Tibetan Apso. And Jackie would get his food because his dad would say, you guys can all ask for food. He is unable to ask for food in a language that you and I might understand. He has a lot of love for us, but you might ignore his attention, his need for his food and all that. So he will get it without asking. I think that mental model always kept us grounded to say there are people around you who you can help and who can help you and support you and therefore stay grounded. And as we grew up, that got reinforced in our interactions. And I think one of the things I've learned many, many years ago was all the tags and the labels that you said, vice president and all, they're all temporary. They're all temporary. Today they are there. Tomorrow you retire. Those tags will go away. Those labels will go away. What will stay is a human being or the person behind those tags and labels. And I think that's what matters to the world and what should matter to all of us. And I think that knowledge of saying that this is all temporary, this position, power, name, is all temporary. It's all it comes in and it will change with time. And therefore, why are you so hung up about it? I think has stayed with me, and I think that's where uh, it's got reinforced for me, to be very honest. And then I think the other thing that has also happened is the fact that when you are humble, it has allowed me to learn a lot from others. And the metaphor that I want to use here, and I know you love metaphors, is like being like the sponge. The sponge is soft and can be twisted and it can be squeezed into a small ball. But when you drop a sponge into a bucket of water, what it does is it regains its old shape. It absorbs the water. But when you lift out the sponge, you are seeing the sponge dripping with water. Right? It's full and it's saturated. But it was humble in the first place. It was dry and it could twist into any shape. And I think that metaphor has stayed with me to say if you're humble and you can be who you are as long as you want to learn, you will always have that opportunity and that ability to absorb it. So if you're humble, if you're willing to learn, and I think that has also allowed me to learn a lot in my life, different experiences, some great, some not so great, but all of them have taught me of that. Look, if you're humble, I think it stays, it pays back in multiple multifolds. So yeah, there's no secret here. It's just I think I would say I would thank my parents for the right values that they've inculcated, and my circle of friends and colleagues who have supported that.
I think when you say there is no secret, that is the secret that you've already revealed in terms of how value system was, like the 720 driver getting the first breakfast of the day. So very interesting. So where and all did you grow up being part of somebody who's working with the military?
Yeah, so I moved around a lot, but it was mostly in the border roads, border areas of the country, especially north and northeast. So I did very early schooling in Rajasthan in Jodhpur. My memories of that school was still like the school next to the railway line and standing there. St. Joseph's was the name of the school in Jodhpur, railway line. And every time the train would pass, we would all just like run out of the class and stand there. And then that school had a underground basement where they used to keep milk powder in sacks, big sacks. So I think one of our pranks used to be to get into the basement to steal some milk powder, but we would always get caught because milk powder you would have on your face after you ate that. So we would get also punished for that. But I think those are the memories there. And then so I did about a couple of classes there, first and second, and then we moved to Sikkim. We did a brief stint in UP when my father was in a family posting. But then we went into Sikkim, and then I studied in Gangtok in Tashinamgyal. I did my class third, fourth, fifth, 3 years there. Again, very interesting times. Very different kind of schooling. It was very, the boarding school plus the rest day scholar kind of school. Very strict principal. Dr. Phantom was his name. But I really enjoyed that place. And I think it was beautiful. Sikkim, mountains, the nature, that whole piece. So I think I started loving that. So we did Sikkim, and it would rain a lot. I still remember we would come back and we would walk a lot because our cantonment was at the top of a hill. So the school bus would leave us at the bottom, and then you would have to climb up and walk up. We had a good fun walking up and running around, but it would have during the race you would have the leeches. So you would have leeches getting into your gum boots, even though you were wearing them, and then you would have all kinds of things there. But it was good fun, and I think my first early childhood memories were getting to form there in Sikkim. Following with that, we went to Nagaland. I studied for a couple of years in Nagaland. And in the meantime, my father also got moved around a little bit to Mizoram and Manipur. But I stayed put in Nagaland. I did my fifth class, sixth, seventh, and eighth, and part of ninth in Nagaland, in Dimapur. Very good memories of that, staying in a military cantonment area, but still having a lot of fun in the school. And that's a place where I think I enjoyed the natural beauty the most, even more, maybe because I remember more of that time than my time in Sikkim. So Kohima and other places were beautiful, really beautiful. And after that, my father was transferred to Kashmir. So that's where I spent the large part of my childhood. after that. So he got transferred to Kashmir. I moved with him. I did my 9, 10, 11, 12 from Kashmir, and then also did my engineering from Kashmir itself. So about 9, 10 years in Kashmir. And during that period, my father moved around a lot, but I stayed put. I said, like, no, I love this place. And it was again a place of natural beauty, immense natural beauty, I would say. So Kashmir. And then after that, I was still in multiple minds of what I want to do in my career. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but as destiny would be, that didn't work out. So I decided to get into engineering, which is what my father was, but I couldn't visualize all the computers and electronics and electrical engineering. So I stayed with things which I could visualize and imagine, saying, okay, there's something which is rotating, something which is turning, which is bending. That's how I got into mechanical engineering. And then post that, then I worked for Unilever after college for about 19 years. That was my first long career stint. I was in supply chain, but started off as a maintenance engineer. I loved my job, but I didn't like the lack of respect that the job had. So when the machines were working, you did not exist for many people in the factory. But when the machine started making noise, they were about to break down. Then I would find a car standing outside my house in the night saying, hey, you need to come to the factory because the machine is likely to break down. So I was like, I don't like this. I'm very passionate as a maintenance engineer even now, even today. But I just think I realized that there were opportunities to grow in the area of manufacturing, more opportunities to grow in manufacturing. And so I kept on pestering my manager to say, can I go and become a manufacturing manager? So manufacturing was production plus engineering, both.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept pestering him. And at that point of time, there was a bit of an unwritten rule that if you're not a chemical engineer, you cannot get into production. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to go back to college for another degree. So I decided that I'll continue to voice what I need from my manager, which is to say, move me to a location where I can be a manufacturing manager. And then I must have pestered him a lot. And then one day he told me, look, we have a factory in Nepal which has not been doing too well. Would you like to go there? And I just got married 4 months before that. We didn't have phones and mobile phones in the house. So I didn't even have a chance to talk to my wife. But I thought, like, in the past, we had talked about being together. So I said, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to get what I want. So without even discussing a lot, with thinking that the opportunity might go away the next day morning if I didn't say yes, I said yes. Moved over to Nepal. And I think that was a very important career move in my life. That's how I moved from engineering and projects and engineering into manufacturing. And then I continued in that journey, built factories, ran factories in India, different parts in Sumerpur, in Silvassa, Goa, and in a corporate role with Unilever. And then subsequent to that, I think I got very comfortable doing what I was doing. So I decided to change my sector, change my company, change the kind of business I was in. And I moved over from consumer goods, which is what Unilever was, to move into infrastructure and procurement and engineering kind of EPC kind of a company, which is RPG Group, their flagship company called KC International. I took over from the promoter's son there, Anand Goenka, who's now the CEO for Seat Tires. He used to be managing that business. So I took over from him. Again, I learned a lot there in the 3.5 years that I was there. And then Amazon was launching in India, and as luck would have been, I felt this was the time to take a bold career move. When I resigned from KC, Amazon had not launched in India at that point of time. So it was like a bit of a leap of faith, but I have no regrets. And then the last 10 years has been with Amazon. So it's been a very fulfilling and eventful journey. I always say this, life is always good and can always be better. So always good allows me to be grateful and have gratitude for what we've got, what I've learned, what I've been able to contribute to myself, to the company, to the society. And can always be better leaves that element of hope and aspiration for something more, something different, something to challenge status quo. So it allows me to keep looking forward.
Oh, wow. So you answered so many questions at one go. So, so I saw that you finished your engineering in Kashmir in, I think, almost 1989, and I was not even born at that point. Oh, yes. So, and then very curious because I love these stories, specifically when they come from a space where a pre-mobile phone era and childhood and like the whole way of life at that point, pre-mobile phone era, is something I'm very, very interested to know more about. Always dig into that space. So, how was your childhood? Any anecdotes that you can remember? And I like the milk powder one. Any other ones?
Continuing on that Bill Potter one, about 6, 7 years ago, we went looking for that school with me and my wife and both my children. So I wanted to close the loop in terms of what I had as faint memories of that underground storage and the railway line in the school. And we found the school. It's a very small school in Jodhpur, but we went found the school. We just knew the name and the railway line part of it. We want found the school. And it was a bit of a closure to say I could tell the children before I reached the school, saying how it would look like and what it would be. So it was good fun. My childhood memories are mostly around nature, mountains, rivers. Um, in the army, wherever we used to live, like my mother was very passionate as a small gardener. So we would always have a garden patch either behind the house or in front, like a small bed of flowers and stuff like that. So I think I always found my joy in watching them grow, plants grow, my mother planting trees, planting small saplings or flower bearing plants. And I think that's continued to be something that I still have. I have a small terrace garden here in my house in Bangalore. So I still do a little bit of potting and trying to grow things very differently. But my memories have been more about nature a lot. And I think that's where I have a fascination for mountains, the rivers, the power of those mountains. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you would have seen I write a lot which is related to nature. Many of my posts are inspired by what I see in nature, what I stand to reflect and step and pause to see what it tells us. There's so much to learn from nature.
Absolutely.
Over these years, also, I think the childhood had, because I kept on moving from one place to another, the friendships were very different. They were small period of friendships, but very intense friendships. I still remember climbing guava trees to uh, take down the guavas and then barter them with the girls in the class to say, I'll give you the guava if you give me the imli. They would get imlis and the small chunia munia pear, the small berries, which are like with spice milk, with sugar, salt, and chili. They're small berries. So there would be barter there. So I think I still remember skipping school assemblies to say, stay back to sweep the classroom. Because when you are sweeping the classroom, you don't have to attend the assembly. And when you are in the classroom, there are only two of you or three of you. And you had the opportunity to go and check everybody's tiffin to say who got what and what should be tasted.
Lovely.
I think many, many memories. Also, I think some of the things that I learned also, like we used to have a library and we would only get a book from the library once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a school teacher, Brother Peter, who used to teach us English. And I think I really loved his way of teaching. So I would finish my storybooks one day, in 1 day or 2 days. And then there was still 5 days before you could get the next book. So we had an informal library within the students to say, you finish your book faster, and then I'll give you my book and we'll rotate it. So we don't have to wait for the next Friday to come for getting our next book. We would get 3, 4 books. And I think my love for reading in my early part started from there. I think that's a memory that I have to say how we would all place the books and on after we finish the books and we say, this is my book and I'll take that and I'll take that and you can take this. And we would do the exchange and then on Friday we would all return our original books back to the class.
So you would know who has what. So supply chain basically started from there.
I think it was more about like who are the good readers, who people who finish their books fast, and therefore engaging with them and finding out who can give you their book. And we had fun. When I was childhood, I still have lots of memories. We had a lot of fun. I think I almost got rusticated in class 3. I think I was punished by my teacher for talking in the class, and therefore I was made to sit with the girl. At that point of time, to sit down with the girl was a punishment in the class. And then we got to become very good friends. And then we said, oh, and we started playing Ghar Ghar, that we have this, we'll play Ghar Ghar. So in the desk, which used to open up, we started making the Ghar. So her name was Shilpi Kapoor. And she and I decided we'd make a Ghar. And then to make the Ghar nice, I thought I'll get agarbatti. So I got agarbatti from my house. And then the desk was a Ghar Ghar, and I wanted to make it nice and smelly. So I lit the agarbatti in the class and put it there. And I think the smell stayed, and then the agarbatti ash basically started burning a hole in the wooden desk. And that's when all hell broke loose. And my teacher was like, "What? How can you do this?" And I was like, "I was just playing." My parents were called in, and they were like told what I did. They had to apologize a lot on my behalf. But those were times when there was innocence. We didn't really care about what would happen to the wood. I didn't even think about the risks that I was taking. It was more about joy in that moment of time.
I love to. I'm just imagining, you doing that, and then also like the teacher coming to be like, "Oh, you're going to be rusticated." I'm like, "Ah, what's rusticated?"
Yeah, yeah. I know my parents had to be called. My father in his uniform had to come down to the school to say, "Well, we are sorry for what they did." We offered. I think he offered to change the desk, but I think the principal was kind enough to say, "Teach him more, teach him better values." I guess.
Amazing. No, and I don't think we will, have that stage of innocence anymore in generations to come.
Yeah.
That was always
There
different.
were no distractions at that point of time for me. There was no mobile phones. It was all books. Go out and play.
Play.
There were no TVs. The first TV that I saw was in my neighbor's house when the Asian Games were going on. So I didn't have a TV in my house till class 12th. My parents were pretty firm about it to say, you complete to 12th and then we'll get you a television. So it was a lot of cycling and a lot of, in Kashmir, we used to live at the base of the Shankaracharya Hill. So just like, today you would just go out and cycle. For me, it was like, oh, get out in the evening at 5 p.m. and say, what do you do? And let's say, let's go and go to the temple. So we wouldn't really go to inside the temple. It was not from a very religious or a pious motive, but just climbing the hill and then in the middle of the hill, sit down on the rocks and eat the aloo bukhara, because there were a few trees that we had aloo bukhara fruit. We would go there, eat it, sit down in the rasta, climb up and get tired, and those were just fun. I mean, I still remember how much we used to love that walk up the hill and go to the temple. Not really, not even for paying our devotion to the Lord, but more just for the fun of it. Very different
Amazing.
days.
Yeah. I think like when you share stories, I think Akhil, so it is like you take us back to that space. I really love the stories that you're sharing. So any more stories, if you have, feel free, or anytime you want to switch from these stories to all the other interesting stories that you have as a bag of package, you can always open them up.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we all have our stories, and I think stories make who we are. I mean, our stories are our lives, right? Even then, because we used to stay in these remote places, we were far away from our extended family. My grandparents were in Pune, so we would look forward to our summer vacation or a winter vacation so that we could go back to them, and we would be very nicely pampered by them. Everything that mom would not give us would be given by the nana nani. All the good things that I would love to eat, I would just get them, like the kheer and all those. Kanda poha was something that my nani used to make very nicely. There was a special aloo ki sabzi with puri that she used to make. Then simple aloo with clear gravy, no masala, nothing. Very clear gravy, but with puri. So we would look forward to those times with our grandparents, nana nani, and with my cousins. And playing cricket was one of those. And we didn't have sometimes all the wicket, so some
Three.
canister, that tree, the canister, anything that could be like a can or a container or a drum, water drum or a paint box, everything would become like a cricket stuff. Maybe it was fun. I think if you ask me, if you had a if I had a time machine, I would actually go back to those days and possibly try to stay there, not try to come back to my current reality.
Oh yeah, I second you on that. So if there was a time machine, definitely go back to childhood. So like all those foods, and like when you said granny's house, I was like, I know, okay, I know what you're talking about. No abandon. So nobody asking you to stop, nobody asking you to not do stuff. So all rules are suddenly off.
Yeah, and I think in those places when the rules are off, there is responsibility which kicks in automatically. The subconsciously responsibility
Yeah.
kicks in. So while Nani Nana are being they're being very kind and they're very generous with their time and things that we would also be responsible. So when I still remember, like my Nani took me to a shop and said, "What gift do you want?" And I think I was still small, but I realized that something which is small is going to be less expensive as compared to something which is very large. So there were two fire engines. One was very small fire engine, and the other one was like a big fire engine. But the big one had these bells and whistles. So when you moved it, there was a bell ringing, and then there was a fireman's ladder which would go up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so tempted to ask her for that, but I was like, no, 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 this might be too much. Therefore, let me just take the smaller one. So that's how becoming responsible, the responsible behavior started kicking in when you have the freedom, when you're choosing. And I think that stays with us to say when we empower people to do what they would like to, they will make responsible choices. I think childhood taught us some of that, and I can connect now. At that point of time, I don't think I knew all this, but today when I look back and said the ability to make responsible choices allows you to do that. Just the freedom to make the choice allows you.
So a lot of stories from here will actually make it to your book, Ride the Tiger.
Riding the tiger, yes. That was a crucible learning moment for me in my life, and not very recent, just about 6 years ago. Uh, it was tough. I had just taken over a role in Amazon, which was an extension of my role. I was running the fulfillment network in India, and then I had taken over transportation. And in 2016, my job was to manage the network for running a very large scale Diwali sale event. I think because it was my first year, maybe I didn't have the experience, and maybe also I didn't look around the corners enough. Um, I made a lot of mistakes, and therefore that sale event didn't go well. And I could see it not going well from day one. And I was feeling miserable. I mean, like this is the company's biggest event of the year, and I wasn't in great shape. The network was not in great shape, and we were missing promises and other things. And my manager, who was based in Seattle, was not calling up, not asking me. And it was first day and second day and third day, and this is not good. And he knew everything what was happening because all the reports, daily reports, etc., were going, and he could see like what was happening on the network. But there was nothing from him, and I think I was like burning in guilt and burning in shame to say I messed it up big time. So after 3 days or so, there was nothing from him. I was like, why is he not bothered? Why is he not asking me? Like, I think, is it like disowned me completely or what? So I actually wrote him a WhatsApp message and told him how miserable I was feeling and how this was not going well. And then he wrote back a very simple two-liner. He said, "You are riding a tiger, my friend. Let's talk about it when it's over." And that stayed with me to say how, in the middle of this crisis that I created, my manager was still so calm. He was still allowing me that space to fix things back, not breathing down my neck and saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Or what will you do? Why did it go bad?" There was nothing about that. And that taught me the power of psychological safety, of how, when your team trusts you or your manager trusts you, how you can do things very differently. And as I thought about this line, he said, "Well, let's talk about it when it's over." And I was like, "What's over?" And then riding the tiger then became apparent to say, you can't jump off. You are on the tiger. You are in the middle of a crisis. You can't jump off the tiger. If you jump off, the tiger will devour you and consume. So you have to wear it till the tiger is tired and then you can run away. But at that point of time, it was like you have to go through this crucible learning opportunity or zone. And it did teach me a lot, teach me and my team a lot. We had our reviews after the event was over. We saw what didn't go well, what we should have done differently. The next year, we did exactly the same thing that we wanted to do the previous year as an outcome. We got the same outcomes, and it was one of our best events so far in the history of Amazon in India. But for me, that whole thing about riding the tiger, allowing me to be in this crucible learning zone, which is to say you are being baked, that intense heat of the moment, you're being baked. But the manager is allowing that to help you to grow and to become a better leader and giving you the space to learn from your own errors and mistakes, I think was phenomenal. So, as I promised to some of you, if I write the book, that will be the title of that book, Riding the Tigers.
So when you write the book, we'll be ready.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I was doing subtle NLP there, saying not where if you write the book, it's when you write the book.
That's also true when I write the book. But it did teach me a lot. And that is how, as leaders, we all have the opportunity to create that safe space for our teams so that they can learn, experiment, fail, try, and know when to walk the edge. I think I learned this walking the edge, and I think it's very important as a concept for me. We can all play very safe and play in the middle of the ground. You're not walking the edge, you're playing very safe, but you're not then challenging your own powers and potential. And you don't know where you'll fall off. So
Mm,
you don't know the point where on the left hand side of that point there is success, and on the right hand side there is failure. What is that fine line? But all organizations, and I'd like to believe that all organizations have a very strong psychological safety net where failure is okay as long as you learn from it. But people worry a lot about failure, and therefore they don't use that. So I always tell my team, and I will tell myself to say, I enjoy walking the edge because I know that's where the adrenaline rushes. You know, you're walking the edge, you have the wind in your hair. Literally, like a metaphor, you can imagine, like if you're walking on the edge of a very high, tall rise building, there is the risk of falling down, but there's a safety net. But it's invisible. You know there is a net, but it is invisible. So you have to trust it. But at the same time, because you're walking the edge, you know that this is the edge of the borders of where I can get to, and you enjoy the thrill of doing that. So walking that edge becomes very critical when you're living to your full potential. Otherwise, you'll play safe, and there is opportunity that is being left on the table just because you don't realize the psychological safety that is available in the organization, or the opportunity to learn through mistakes and through errors and through experiments.
Lovely. So I think quite a interesting etymology to the whole book and riding the tiger. And like another question, I think somewhere like in terms of gossips that I heard is that you've actually met Jeff Bezos.
I have. I have met him a couple of times. Somewhere in my books, I have a picture. Maybe I'll send it to you separately. I have a picture of, with me and Jeff together. And then there was a day I spent in 2020, yeah, just before COVID, January, when Jeff was here. I took him around the whole day. I was with him in his car. And it was a very interesting experience. Almost the whole day we spent. He came in from I think he came from Delhi. I was in Bombay. Then we went around to see some of our stores, showed him some of my operations. He visited the delivery station with me, and then I left him at his hotel. It was a great learning experience. That was that one almost like a full day with him in 2020, just before COVID. But I've met him, and I think I'm inspired by what he has done, what he has built. And these are leaders that you look up. I mean, no one is perfect. Everyone has gone through their own shares of learning. And therefore, if you look up to them and see what they've done and how they think, how they work, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity to learn from them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think when you have leaders specifically around psychological safety, somebody who you look up to who already inspire just with their presence, you're always showing up as your best self. You
Absolutely.
whatever comes along, you're like, let us push, and then like going around the edge. So when you were sharing that, I was like, okay, this is what maybe Akhil will use when he's a coach. He'll wait for the client to move past the edge, and then share things that they may not have shared at the first conversation and all that. So around the same topic, so what does your ideal work day look like?
That's an interesting question. I wish I had an ideal work day. I'm in operations, so in operations we always have very different days every single day. But a typical day, if you were to ask me what a typical day would look like, I think it would have a mix of many things. So my regions are very disparate. I manage APAC, and I manage the Middle East, North Africa, and then I also manage Mexico, Brazil, and the Latin America side. So my days are basically three parts. The first early morning part is basically between me in India, the team in Japan or Australia or Singapore, and then some meetings and people in Seattle, right? So that's the first part of the day. Days start early, anywhere between 4 and 6 a.m. And then they will go up to 8, 9 a.m. So that's the first part of the day. Then I would take a break, go for my walk. I enjoy my walks in the morning, so I go for a walk. And then the second part of the day, which is more like the India and the Middle East, by which that time between that 9, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. or so, 3 p.m. or so. I think that's the second part of the day, which is pretty chunky. And then the evening part of the day, which is usually starting 6 p.m. and goes up to 8, 9, 10 sometimes. But I've been very fortunate to have people and managers who understand the need for my flexibility, and therefore I have days when I can go and take an afternoon siesta and sleep a couple of hours if I know it's going to be a long day. So the flexibility has allowed me to work through these different time zones. But within the time zones and within these hours of work, even though they might be in chunks, there's always a very plethora of exciting things. So if the Prime Minister suddenly made a trip to Bangalore, then I know the roads will be closed. So how are you going to deliver in the traffic? You already have shipments to deliver and it's a sudden announcement. So you will try to figure out how to do this without impacting customer promise. Or you have heavy rainfall in Himachal, and therefore, where do you focus on? Do you focus on taking care of your people and seeing that they are safe, they're safe, and their families are okay, they're not part of the landslides, and they're not part of the homes which have been damaged, and at the same time balance what the customers need, because this is the time of their biggest need. We supported in times of extreme floods and so on. Or like, for example, Manipur, where we did not have internet for 143 days or so. How do you deliver? Because as a tech company, we are all using tech and apps, and therefore all our processes are based on technology. There's no paper that we would say, okay, I'm giving Akhil 50 shipments to deliver, and he delivered 40 of them, and then 10 of them could not be delivered. This all in the past it used to be all paper based, but no longer, right? So as an operations leader, you will always have day by day contingencies, whether it's related to weather, whether it's related to social unrest, whether it's related to roads blocked, bridges closed, landslides, curfews, all of those pieces. And then the nature of the work is also very interesting. So one could go from a meeting on people and incentives to the next meeting on a supplier who's not delivering on time, the next meeting on deciding on the capacity and strategy for the next 3 years, to a meeting with the business leaders on how the business is doing and what we need to do from an operations perspective to support the business, to a meeting which would be on diversity, inclusion, gender diversity, and say what are the steps we are taking in that space, to just having a lot of fun and saying what will we do as to be the best employer if we have that vision to work on. So I think the spectrum of work on a daily basis changes, and that spectrum is the one that keeps me excited. That's the one which allows me to have the energy to say, okay, yes, it's going to be a fun day. It's going to be an interesting fun day.
I was like, okay, when will Akhil stop and say, okay, this is where the meetings ends, Kungi?
No, I think I've been very fortunate and privileged to be in this role from the time that we started in India, and then my role grew over a period of time. I started with India only for the fulfillment side and took over transportation and supply chain, and then managed India operations for a couple of years before I expanded it to APAC, and then later on to Mexico, Middle East, and North Africa, and then Latin America. But in this process, what I've realized is our days are not exactly the same. You can try to structure the day, but typically in operations, based on ground realities on a day-to-day basis, it will not stick to that ideal day as you've called out, right? So the piece that we have all built a lot of muscle on is dealing with ambiguity, number one. Number two, I think, is being very flexible and agile to say if something is critical, then how do you do this? At the same time, if it has to shift, then we do it with some prioritization. So the ability to prioritize, I think, has also, this stint of 10 years at Amazon has taught or honed that skill of how do you prioritize. There'll always be tons of things on your work plate. Which ones do you consume and which ones do you let go for another time or another day? But the variety of things to work on, and I've always been very passionate about growing the team and growing the people and helping them. And that's how coaching came in. I started my journey to become a coach only last year, middle of last year. But prior to that, I've been mentoring for almost 8, 10, maybe more years. And I realized that I was making impact in the area of mentoring, but it was a very limited group of people in the area of supply chain and operations and logistics. So a lot of my time in my day-to-day work is around people. How do we make that impact the community, people around us? or to the teams, that's just people who work with us, or how do you discover yourself and become more self-aware, which is about me. So I think that's the place of passion. This is journey of almost 35 years of my corporate career has brought me to. But that excites me. This space excites me a lot.
So what drew you to coaching? So you did share around, like coaching came to you, but what pulls you into coaching?
Can I be honest here and candid?
Absolutely.
I was mentoring for many years, and I realized that the impact I was creating was only in the space, in the limited space of supply chain operations, logistics. And I felt that I could create more impact beyond that. So I talked to a few people, and they said, if you're a mentor and you've been mentoring, why don't you get involved in coaching? And when I started learning about coaching, it told me that I did not need to have domain expertise. I could coach people from a different business background without being an expert in that. And I said, wow, this looks very interesting and it's fascinating. And then somebody said, but to become a coach, you can label yourself as a coach, but you would not be a true coach. And therefore, you need to go through coach training and understand the concepts and the models. And I was like, okay, this is a lot of hard work, but let me put myself through it. My first 6 months in coaching basically completely transformed the way I was thinking about coaching. So as I entered coaching, it was about I want to help people find their potential, and I want to help people to live a better life, a fuller life by reaching their potential and helping others grow. So it was about others that I thought I entered coaching. 6 months into coaching, and I think I realized, and it was a bit of an aha moment or a oh God moment, whatever you want to call it. It's like, no, it's a lot about me. I don't know a lot about myself. I don't know about my own emotions. I'm not aware. I'm not a great listener. I'm not present in many conversations which are happening, whether it is on the family front, whether it is happening at work. And I'm physically there, but my mind is somewhere else. And therefore, this journey of coaching pivoted for me. And while I thought I would help others, I think I realized that I need to help myself first before I can help others. And that was a huge realization for me. So that was an outcome of like, no. Before you help others and before you help others reach their potential, first be aware of yourself. And that realization was very stark. It hit me very strongly and it was very powerful. And therefore, now that I'm aware, and now there are times when I know the difference between my own emotions. Like in the past, I would tell my team, I'm feeling very angry. But actually, I was not angry, but I did not know the right emotion that I was going through. So I was not angry, but I was vexed because I couldn't understand something, but I was still calling myself that I was angry, or I was vexed, or I was irate, or I was upset. And so there were different elements to it. And I think that whole emotional vocabulary started coming in, and I started realizing that no, I'm not angry, I'm vexed, I'm puzzled by it. Therefore, I don't have to be upset with anything. I'm just needing to find the right person to help me come out of my dilemma. So I think the self-awareness allowed me, and that's allowing me to now also become more present, to be a better listener, be more engaged, not involved, but engaged. So in a coaching conversation, how do you remain engaged completely, but not get involved or become the client in that whole space? So it's been a journey. And now I think it's more about how coaching is allowing me to become a better human being. As a coach, a better human being. So the rest of the world and the impact that I can create on the rest of the world, I think I'm very happy to let it be, and it will come naturally. I'm not chasing that. I'm looking at how we follow the process and how we are able to create a safe space for people to talk and listen intently, be present there. And how do you then move people with that conversations, candid conversations? How do you evoke awareness in them? How do you get them to connect with their reality and their limiting beliefs, and then facilitate their growth? I think that's been my journey in coaching. So a long answer to a short question, but I think for me, it was like the pivot to say it's not about others and growing others. It's first about you being self-aware rather than anybody else.
Here I was being the good coach and you are being the perfect client. Short question, long answer. So I find sometimes podcasting is actually somewhere, very strongly connected with the coaching aspect, except it becomes a very informal space. You're off guard basically. You are yourself. There's this that flow of thoughts. I think from where we started to almost now around 48 minutes, I was like, oh, 48 minutes have gone by, and I haven't even realized that it's such a intense conversation over such a long time. So, like there are many questions like in terms of whatever you shared. And I also wanted to know a little bit of these interesting things that happen in a production unit to a space where it actually comes out as a final product. Because I also feel that, like when we spoke, I think in Nasira's house around how toothpaste with the twin colors come out and, how jam was placed into it. I thought, wow, like I've never heard of these stories and never know about something that happens behind the scenes. So, any behind the scenes stories that you can share will always be something that I will be a lot more curious to understand more stories. But the audience will also be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and a lot of them in my Unilever days where I was actually into production. I was at one point of time responsible for product innovation deployment. So innovation was happening globally, but then we were deploying it in India. So I don't know if you have seen the Wim Bar, which is used for washing the dishes.
Mhm.
If you look at the Wim Bar about 13, 14 years ago, it used to get soggy very quickly because of the water, because it would be kept near the kitchen
Mhm.
sink and it would get very soggy and then it would be like a mushy paste. It would be like a pasty bar.
Mhm.
And we had this whole project of like, how do you put a raincoat around that bar? I think the mental model was you need to put a raincoat around the bar and only have the top surface. That's how the Vim Polycoat project was born, where we actually used a kind of a lacquer to spray around on three sides of the tablet so that you could prevent it from water ingress and therefore protect like a raincoat on five sides, but only the top surface was exposed for consumption. So that became the Vim bar with a raincoat. And there was an advertisement, I'm sure if you Google it up, you'll see a Vim bar now with a raincoat around it, a layer which would protect water ingress around it. And then there was all these ice cream things that we talked about, or things like uh, toothpaste, or how do you have, even today, if you look at it, there are different kinds of toothpaste and they come with all kinds of sparkles inside them, or the bars in there. And how do you make the stripes on the toothpaste by having a cone at the middle? They're different colors. So you put in one color first and then you put the rest of the color. So as you squeeze the white paste, goes through this colored paste, and that was leaves the stripes there. So in terms of innovation, there were like lots of things that we did. Uh, Innovations in the area of food products, like toothpaste, for example, was personal care, or Wimble Bar that I talked about, or even things like Cornetto. If you have a jam, then how do you have a jam stick in the middle and have the ice cream all around it? It was a challenge. Jam flows only when it is hot. And ice cream, if you connect it with something which is hot, it will melt. And therefore, we had to actually freeze a jam stick and put it in the middle and then have the ice cream around it. Or simple things like lipsticks, for example. You need wax. Lipsticks are made of wax, and wax has to be soft. So it has to be soft enough for you to put in the lips without hurting your lips. It has to move from the lipstick to your lip, right? That's transfer of product has to happen. But in the same country, when you transport this lipstick in a truck, the temperature under the tarpaulin during summer can go up as high as up to 45, 46 degrees centigrade, where the wax will melt. Therefore, the lipstick would not have a very nice angled shape. You see, all lipstick have an angled shape. The angled shape would start drooping because of the temperature, and therefore, you would have to find the right mix of waxes, which would prevent it from melting and losing shape. At the same time, you would also need to ensure that it withstands the temperature and sell the truck. And then we built a completely different supply chain, not move it to trucks, but move it by air and move it by faster means of transportation and not necessarily through trucks. So I think there were many places where one had to innovate to meet customer needs. One of the examples that I have from Amazon is when we started off very early, the big thing we realized is the address quality is very poor. And therefore, how do you deliver to addresses when customer says, I live in the yellow house behind the bank, which is in the blue building. That's how the addresses would come in the beginning. And bank, blue building, and yellow house. And it's very hard now. All the technology that was built on geocodes, etc., would not work here because we didn't have those models to pick up the addresses. So one of the things we realized is who knows how to deliver to these places, and the best people was the Kirana stores. So all parts of the country, the Kirana store is delivering the milk and the bread to the customer. So we built a program called I Have Space, where the Kirana stores did not need to have any investment. And all Kirana stores typically have somebody in the store. They are all there since more from morning till evening when the store is closing. But they have some free hours during the day when people are in the afternoon, footfalls are less. So we started building a program called I Have Space, where the Kirana stores, we would give them a few shipments and say, can you deliver to the area around you, 1 to 2 to 4 kilometers in radius? You know these customers, they are already buying stuff from you. You are already delivering through their houses. You know when they are going to be there. You know when Mr. Gupta is going to be at home. He works all day. In the evening, he gets his milk and bread. So you know when Mr. Gupta is there or when Mrs. Bhavani is not going to be at home. So you know all this. And you have credit history with them. Like they are sometimes giving you the money, sometimes they don't have the change. So you can say, sir, I'll collect it tomorrow. Don't worry. I'll put in the Hisab Kitab. So we started then building a program to say, how do we leverage the Kirana stores for delivering in India where the address quality was very poor? And we built this program called I Have Space. And this program in India, we now have almost 24,000 stores across 320 cities where we run this program, where these are mom and pop stores, but they deliver for us as a significant portion of our delivery network. And it became so successful in India that we moved it to other countries, including Japan. You would imagine Japan would have good quality address, but we still had opportunities for this use case in Japan. We have it in Mexico as a program. We have it in the US as a program now. Middle East has the same program. So the ability to invent backwards from what a customer need is to say deliver without a proper address became a program, and that's how we invented there. The other thing was on technology, like Amazon in the US. When we started in the US, you leave your shipments outside on the doorstep, so there is no attended delivery. You scan, you leave the shipment, and you walk away, and that is there and safe outside in the doorstep. But in India, it has always been attended delivery. Now in India, because it is attended delivery, there is cash on delivery. US is no cash on delivery concept. Yeah, US was all prepaid through your credit card. So our app was designed only for delivering products, but not accepting anything. Right? But here in India, we have to accept the money from the customer. So we built the app completely differently in India to say, here's cash on delivery. Therefore, when I'm giving you a product, the delivery app has to work, but then the delivery app has to be customized to receive the money and then reconcile at the end of the day. And then we realized that, because there was so much of change that we had to carry, like people would leave with bags of change in the morning when they started on the delivery route because every customer said, I don't have change. And so then we had to invent and innovate a product, which is to say, okay, if there is some, supposing you have to give me 48 rupees, but you have a 50 rupee note, I had to give you 2 rupees change. But then we built a product where I could put the 2 rupee into digital wallet. So we built a digital wallet for you. That the 2 rupees could be there and you could use it whenever you are making your next purchase or put it for later use whenever you wanted it. So we had to build that product, and it was the India first product that we had. So I'm just sharing some examples of innovations where you work backwards from the need of the customer and then find a solution, which is not just to serve the customer, but also work with the communities around you and benefit them as well.
Absolutely. So, like a lot of stories now for you to put on LinkedIn and share, and also to put it on your book. Like fascinating stories. Akhil, so just imagining the width and bandwidth of generally India as a overall subcontinent and a country, and say I was told Madhya Pradesh is actually the size of Brazil. If that is the case, so if you have to do something like that, you're almost delivering to an entire country when you are getting to a state in India almost, and to have so many states, so many challenges at delivery and doing that, I was like, just imagining is something that is similar to activities in your brain. You don't know what's happening, but it's working.
I've been very fortunate to have a very strong team, a team which is really passionate. So I've been very fortunate to have been able to build that team.
My God. So what I've discovered, I think, is that this is podcast one. There are many, many more podcast episodes, left with whatever you're sharing. And I think, I don't know if you are thinking of this, but a masterclass on innovation, I think, is a must-have from you around all the experiences you've had. And if you're not thinking of it, I'd love to host you on it.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. I will take that up as a note for myself.
Yes. So, any questions that you wanted me to ask, but I haven't asked you yet?
I think, as you said, this is podcast 1.0. Maybe there is another version, another part.
Oh, yes. So that's a confirmation. That's a subtle confirmation that there's going to be a second podcast.
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity, Pungesh, to
Yes.
be honest.
So I think the joy has been completely mine. If you've seen the entire podcast, I think I've been like this, like listening with rapt attention, almost all through the 1 hour that we've had. So I'd love to welcome you to the second episode. If any parting message for somebody who's listening to the first episode, what would that be?
I think it's going to be around finding your own passion, finding your own mojo, and doing things that continue to excite you, continue to fuel that mojo, fuel that passion, and lead you towards that purpose in life. And I think we all discover a purpose in life at different stages, and sometimes it changes. We think our purpose in life is A, but when we come to a certain point in our careers, we realize, oh, it's not A, but it's A plus plus or something else. And I think, therefore, always reflecting on to say, what is it that this question that we had in that class was, what does the universe need from you? I sometimes don't have good answers, and sometimes my answers change. But finding that purpose and finding what excites you about that, what makes you passionate about that purpose, I think is super important. And I would encourage all of you to think about what does that mean for you.
Wow, amazing. So that's a good way to pause this podcast and then be ready for episode 2 whenever Akhil gives us time. So thank you,
Thank you.
Akhil, for giving your time and also sharing some of your experiences and putting also us back in Kashmir, Nagaland, and all those places that you've been a part of. So thank you for this episode. Yeah, so until the next episode, I'm going to be definitely waiting for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pungi. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.